You know, whenever I made this jump from practicing into tech, it wasn't just because I saw the writing on the wall and I understood how technology and practice were going to come together. It was also because I was trying deeply, probably, to find something that was more uniquely myself, something that yes, maybe play to my own strengths per se. I wasn't a bad lawyer. I think I'm okay business person, but it was something about being more yourself and that there's value in and of itself about doing that.
Right.
And that there is something for you within that. There is a market for that, and that you can do that. And I think it's just because of where legal is at and some sort of the cultural baggage that we have right now, that idea about being yourself is a little bit outside of what people really uh, can appreciate. I think
Yeah.
people who get into solo practice or start their own practice, maybe they get a touch of it, but maybe they don't even go all the sort of like the way in terms of understanding that the differentiating factors really come down to yourself, your relationship, and something about that sort of trifecta about the work product, yourself, and the relationships that you have.
I would add that there's something really exciting about creating. You're doing the law and you're in a role and you're playing your part and you're cranking out work product, and I get all that, and there's creativity involved in that in those
Sure.
matters. But when you go out and start something, or when you go out and help build something, and there's sales and marketing and operations and finance, and you're becoming great at one thing, or you're helping to
Mm,
design, be that lawyer, or you're designing McDonald's, or you're designing whatever it is that you're creating. That's exciting. And then when you actually get through the other side and it's there and people acknowledge it, it's even more exciting. So that's maybe another
yeah.
piece of why lawyers might feel stuck in a role is a spoke in a wheel versus maybe creating the whole car.
Yes, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
So
lot of that. Yeah, creativity sort of definitely plays a core part of it. It's almost so you have to believe that you can create,
yeah.
effectively, and that gives you the freedom to sort of go in this way.
Yeah. Now, something interesting too that you and I have in common is our interest, the interesting people that we get to interview on our podcast. And in this case, you're the interesting person I'm interviewing. But I also have this new book out. Be that lawyer, 101 top rainmakers, best ideas, and et cetera. So, what I thought would be really interesting would be for you to share some of the takeaways from your podcast, This Legal Life, and I'll share some of the best takeaways that people that are listening now have either heard or maybe they've missed and they need to go back. We don't need to necessarily give out names, but we can talk about what are some of the
Sure.
best takeaways, and I'll allow you to take the first shot if you want.
Sure. Just to set up the podcast again, remind everybody, the idea is we live in a world that people can create careers in legal that I think are highly meaningful for them. Is it easy? No. Is it simple? In some ways, a little bit, yes. It's kind of based on what I've spoken to a little bit. In a way, in a sense, I started the podcast because for a very specific reason, which is whenever I graduated law school, I was basically told three things as my entire career advice. One, go in-house to a company. Two, go work for the government. Three, go work for a law firm. That was it. That was the whole thing,
Yeah.
period. That's what I got. Whenever, okay, that's fine. I didn't even know what it meant within the context of I chose to go to a law firm and I didn't even know what that meant about developing a career. It was kind of just, falling forward at the point in time where I thought, wow, can I even just jump from being within those three lanes into tech? There was no manual, it was just you're going off into the wilderness by yourself. So the podcast really sort of tries to pull out and say it shouldn't be this hard. And in fact, there are other people who have done it if I interview these people and get their life lessons. So that's the thing. In some sense, I'm trying to speak to the thing that I didn't have whenever I tried to do both of these jumps. One, develop a career as a lawyer in my first take, and my second take, trying to get into tech, and leverage sort of my relationship. Not my relationships, my experience, basically.
Hey, everybody, I know you're enjoying this interview. To hear more just like this, check out all of the podcasts on our website. Link is in the description below.
Um, I can talk, at a very high level, and then I want to send it back to you. You know, what is so interesting is that at the end of I use the hero's journey. The act three. Act one is I leave the old world. Act two is I go into the new world and I learn some sort of skill and I transform. Act three is I come back to the tribe and I share lessons learned. That's the hero's journey loop, basically. And you can see it once you know it. You see it in every single movie that's like about the hero's journey. It doesn't matter. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, Hunger Games. It goes on and on and on. It's the same thing always. So I get these lessons learned from people all the time because it's part of the action. It's part of the question sequence. And basically it always comes back to one thing, which is don't let fear rule your life.
Mm,
That's basically it. That's the whole thing. And easier said than done. And everybody has to go through this by themselves. But effectively, it comes back to don't let fear rule your life. And I know that that's a really poignant and quite frankly, a really big point in terms of how much are you living from fear. I went through it myself. You know, how much did fear even drive your success
yeah.
based on the idea that more success would give me would make me less afraid. In fact, it's actually the opposite. You know what I mean? In some sense, sometimes success actually drives more fear in a way, if you're not sort of leading from some other sort of like value system.
Well, and there's a made up sort of acronym for feel, or fear is false evidence appearing real. I don't know if I heard that
Yeah.
back in the '90s or something like that, but it's so much of our fear is just driven by our brains and not in reality. I mean, we're not gonna walk outside my place right now and a tiger is gonna attack me, right? I
Right.
mean, what is fear? Why is public speaking like number two on the list of things people fear? It's all in our head. So it doesn't mean it isn't real in some ways
Sure.
because your fear is real.
Mm.
However, it's how we address it and how we overcome it that decides what our lives are going to be. If we're afraid of everything
Mm.
all the time, we're going to hide under our desks, and that's the end of it. Business development is a great example
Mm.
of
Yeah.
lawyers having fear because they think it's or believe it's sales or that it's ugly or dirty. And what I'm teaching every day is no, it's actually solving problems. You're solving problems for people. And the only way you could solve problems for people is figuring out that they should use you as their lawyer, not someone else. How do we do that?
Mm.
Well, we have to, follow a, planning and process and steps to do it in a non-salesy way. And so a lot of the lawyers that I work with, as an example, have those fears and they quickly realize in working with me that it is mostly in their heads and it's just a matter of trying some new things out that alleviates the fear, right? I'm afraid of heights, but I go and I climb the flagpole and I look down and I realize, look, I'm safe, I'm okay on the flagpole, and that's the end of it. Now I don't have a problem. I'm going in a small plane, taking my son to Canada for fishing, and I'm going in a small plane. Well, I've been in a small plane crash. So
Mm.
should I be afraid and not go on the plane again? No, I've been on a small plane since, and I had to overcome that to get to be,
Mm.
comfortable with the idea that, and by the way, it's likely to strike twice in the same place. That's kind of what I say to myself. So
Yeah.
anyway, I love that. Don't let fear, control your life. And that's huge for anyone and everyone, not just for lawyers.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, it's in my own sense, you know, it was fear about, let's say, you know, and where does fear come from? Fear is largely a survival. So I studied biology before I went into law school. It's largely evolutionarily drawn, and you do the famous example. You know, you're not going to get attacked by a tiger
Yeah.
as soon as you walk out, right? And but unfortunately, we have the same brains that we did almost 100,000 years ago, and so these fear responses are sort of baked in. Effectively, it's a survival mechanism that has gotten us to this point in time. But it goes further than that. You know, today's fear is largely around the idea of insecurity, the idea of will people respond if I say something that is in line with my own beliefs. And this manifests things in like people pleasing, which eventually just leads to burnout because you're basically betraying yourself in this sense. And so this is all very, very difficult, and it manifests itself in a lot of what you're doing. The big take of this is, and I can say this very, very, very directly. It's after interviewing so many people about this legal life, basically what they come up to is like some way, somehow, you're going to have to face your fear. Either reality will come crashing on you and you'll have to face it,
Yeah.
or the other side, which you know, is difficult, which is you work with the fear, you sort of
Yeah.
put yourself through this, right?
Well,
But there's no getting around it. There's no
embrace the
getting around
suck,
it.
right, Ben? You
Yes,
got to embrace the suck.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like you,
exactly, exactly.
and so how do you get to the other side of anything? You have to face it and you have to get through it. A tough conversation, changing a job, starting a business. I mean, don't go into things, haphazardly, but go into things intelligently and with confidence and knowing that you've done the work to set yourself up to be successful. Don't start a business and just say, "Hey, tomorrow I'm going to quit my job and start a business doing
Sure.
whatever." Like that. That's not the fear. That's not fear. That's stupidity.
Mm,
So I think it's a combination of things that help you overcome the fear. Maybe talking to people that have done it before, right? That have started businesses like you and I, whatever. But that we've got to find a way through or around it, and that no doubt about that. Hey, let me move on
mm,
to one that has been a reoccurring theme on this podcast and in my new book, the Be That Lawyer, Top Rainmakers. It's really about, and you said this earlier, it's about authenticity. The
mm.
idea
Yeah.
that we need to stand apart from the crowd. And if we're just like everybody else, how is that helping us build a business? How is that helping us, be successful and be memorable in our careers? So I would just say that if you're afraid to show your real, if you're the worst person, then yeah, hide yourself. But if you're a great person like you and me and others that we work with, you gotta shine. You have to have a way of letting people know, that you're great at what you do, but also that you're real and that you're someone
Yeah.
that they can identify with. Okay,
Mm,
thoughts
yeah,
on that?
totally. So many thoughts. The reality is it does come back to fear. And like I sort of mentioned, fear doesn't, a lot of high performing people who are great at what they do are largely driven by fear, except it doesn't look like they're hiding underneath their desk. Instead, which was the case in myself, having to grapple with my fear, it's one, I repressed that I was afraid. And then secondly, I overdid it, overdrive. Everything was over driven to perfectionism. I mean, whatever your sort of thing that you push yourself to.
If you want to check out more about what Fretzin does every day to help you be that lawyer, confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker, please check out our services page on our website. Just go to the website, check it out. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks.